If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you.
Hello Internet, we are back and I'm excited. We have somebody here, Cobus here. He's a fan of the show, I might say that. Contacted me, and as always I invite all of you, if you want to speak to me, please just do so. I'm not some Hollywood star or something. I will always come back to you. Now Cobus has a fascinating story to tell us because he comes from a military family. Now that's important to me because the one thing which I saw in the last few months while we were recording is that most of the South African Defence Force members were family men. And I admire that because it takes a certain kind of man to keep a marriage going. It's not always easy, especially not if you're in a war situation. And I often wondered what were happening to the children. I have some friends who were from military families. We lived in Katima Mulilo for a while. And during that stage, in the late 1970s, all my friends, their fathers were either in the Army or Air Force. And they were different. They were certainly different from us. We came from a civilian side. So Cobus, thank you for your time. Thank you for coming here. I really appreciate you. Tell me, where do you come from?
Oh, pleasure to be here, Chris. Firstly, thanks for the opportunity to speak, and I really want to say thank you very much for reaching out and saying welcome. We were part of it, and you mentioned that the army men, it takes a specific kind of person to be that father. But the mothers as well, they had hair on their teeth, and they kept things going on the home front, and really strong women, and they really did well with what they had because the husbands were never there. And my mom always said she considered murder a couple of times, divorce never. So, yes, I was born in 1975, early 1975 in Potchefstroom, the same as Jock, also in Kalida's hospital. At that stage, my dad was attached to 4-3 battery in Walvis Bay, and they were still part of Vierveld or 4-field artillery regiment from Potchefstroom, but the battery was based in Walvis Bay. I can't remember much then. One story that parents told me is, and I started swearing very early. I drove around to the RSM of the base and mimicked him. Assault troops not doing what they were supposed to be doing. This little 2-year-old told him, got them in line, and drove them. After Walvis Bay, we moved back to Potchefstroom, the gunner haven. All the gunners move in and out of Potchefstroom. That's just how it works. The School of Artillery is also there. My dad became the battery sergeant major at 1 medium battery, which was 5.5s, and got a bit of interesting history around the 5.5 gun. And as Paddy van Niekerk also said, it was old weaponry. Some of it came from World War II. There was a couple of new guns as well, I read, but most of the ordnance was World War II stock. The 5.5 gun, also an interesting story. It started out as a 100-pounder. 5.5 is the barrel diameter, 140 millimeters, and it fired a 100-pound shell. And I think it was around about 1942 they realized if they make the ammunition a bit lighter, they can get more distance. And in 1944 they introduced proximity fuses. So now it's a hell of a long time from the guns being in World War II using proximity fuses to 1975. And that was the new gun. They still had the 25-pounder as well, which was really old, full range. So the Cubans out distanced them with rockets, and later on, obviously, South Africans being clever oaks at Boermakeplan, invented our own weaponry, and got hold of these oaks. Yes, after that we moved to Forsyth and in Middelburg. The army decided to make Forsyth a combined unit with Panzer. They changed from motorized infantry to mechanized infantry. First Rattles also attached to Forsyth, and the first G5 battery was attached. They got some troops from 14 Artillery Regiment, and my dad always said that was his best battery he ever had. But I know some of the guys on the internet, great bunch, and they were trained on the G5, and they also, I think they were part of Cairo. I need to check my dates with that. But anyway, the base life. we were, all the children in the base were friends or knew each other, and we roamed the place. Obviously, most of the times our parents were deployed, so only the mums there to keep us in check. And we had a royal time. There was an Olympic-sized swimming pool, diving board, trampoline, 2 rugby fields. You're in an enclosed base with guards, so you're not going anywhere. We did, however, sneak out one night. That story later. And it was fun growing up there. Holidays were also, that was awesome. Our mothers decided to keep us occupied, so they would organize these camps to Doornkop, which was the shooting range just outside Middelburg. And there we were taught fieldcraft, eating out of rat packs, spoorsnij, tracking, just building a bivvy and building bunkers and stuff like that, how to dig trenches. Everything the troops learned, we were sort of also introduced to. Shooting signal flares, had opportunity to shoot grenade launchers, snotneus, and also the mag and off-walls. It was a lot of fun. So school holidays were really special. And another day was when the troops had a family day. There was normally a demonstration, and then it would be shooting and demonstrating, starting with the weapons, small caliber up. Elan 90 or the Rattle 90s would shoot targets. Sometimes the police came in, they blew a car to smithereens with commercial explosives, or they had limpet mines they probably stocked up somewhere or found in a cache and showed us the power of this. And then after the demo was done, there was a huge barbecue, braai, and we got cool drink, and the parents and the troops could mingle. And then that was when we started with our little excursion, because the parachutes for illumination flares was great things to play with. And then the main prize, if you could get the 81 illumination parachute, you were in the bouncies, because what we did, we jumped from the garage roof with these parachutes, with 81 parachutes. Luckily, no broken arms or bones there. I broke my brother's arm in a different incident, but that's also a bit later of a story. Yes, and it was just a lot of fun. Coming back to injuries, there was one specific year where we just had bad luck. I don't know, it's bad luck or just being naughty. But there was a national service doctor at that stage. Everybody else was deployed. The other doctor was, I think it was just the dentist and this national service doctor. And I got bitten by a scorpion first, and then my brother and his mate had sword fight with metal rods, and the mate hit him over the head, hole in the head. I then electrocuted myself with a lawnmower, after which my dad was flown back quickly. And one or two more minor cuts, and well, not minor, but enough to go to the doctor. And the sequoia was just like 150 meters from the house, so it was not a hell of a track. But when they found that poor doctor on a Sunday afternoon, because accidents only happen on Sundays, it's just how it works. Then he would go, "Wat het daai twee klein bliksems nou weer gemaak?" I think that I was so happy to clear out and never work with PF kids again. Yeah, other thing, we sell petrol for the lawnmower from my dad's garage, and my mate, his brother, was in 3-2 battalion, a lot older than us, so he had a motorbike that was parked at the house, actually 2 motorbikes. And one day we had 50 out, and my dad was catching an afternoon nap, and the roads weren't tar. It was sort of a gravel mixed with sand, but it was black. And then 2 times a day, the water truck would come spray it down so there's not too much dust. So we're on this 50 driving around. Out of the corner of my eye, I can see my dad coming with a belt. And I'm trying to get off this thing, but as I'm trying to get off, I put the throttle, and this bike is doing a donut with me in the middle, and I'm just trying to get off. And I got the hiding, and my dad said to me afterwards, he said, "You know what? It would have been fine if you just rode the motorbike. But jy's wind gehad." Well, I was just trying to get off. So, loads and loads of fun. Other kids played cops and robbers. We played army the whole time. My dad came back from deployments. He would bring us trommels full of rat packs, ammo cases full of rat packs. Like we loved it. Camped out in the garden for 2 weeks, 8 rat packs. It was a lot of fun. Another interesting thing there, we ran on a bus. So all the kids hopped on the bus, stopped at the Afrikaans primary school, drop us off, and then he would drop off the English kids and then the high school kids. And in the afternoons, we got the short straw, stopped at the Afrikaans school. We had to get in first, and then we had to go to the English primary school. And I think they were about 15 minutes after us, so we had to sit in the bus and wait. Then it was off to the high school, and longer wait, and honestly got up to no good. And had a couple of good drivers as well, which we made friends with. And so we play all sorts of games, kicking balls and playing rugby, throwing water balloons at passers-by and stuff like that. You know? What was interesting during the riots, you never knew that you knew there was something going on. I think in Potch and those places, the army bases are not that integrated into the comings and goings of the unit. But in Middelburg, you realized it a lot more. So there would be a troop of full banana clip and cross your heart battle dress on extra mags. And then when stuff de-escalated, you would drop the battle dress and just have a full of normal clip. And then the guard would disappear and the driver would have a sidearm, and then the driver would be back in Brown's normal, nothing. But sometimes there was an old sergeant major. He worked in the transport park, and he was not friendly at all. And he would be the guard. Oh, it was like being in Catholic school. Nobody was allowed to speak. You just sit still and you pray. And when with all these stops, you weren't allowed to move off your seat, get off the bus or anything. So when he was there, it was hell. You've never seen such well-behaved kids in your life. But he typical Sergeant Major voice, like that. So yeah, I'm thinking of one more interesting story in Middelburg. Oh yes, fun thing. There was a lot of terraces, and we found targets. So the painted side of the target is very smooth. So you slide it down these terraces. Loads of fun. Grab a couple of mates or just normal carton boxes. You would slide down these terraces. And this one specific day, some of the kids decided to go to the ammo dump and slide from the wall of the ammo dump, which is also a nice little slope. Luckily, I wasn't even aware of the whole thing. I wasn't close by, so I plead innocence. And the RSM found them, and he took them all to the detention barracks, locked them all up. And he's an avid marathon runner. He did his training and ran. Geez, the whole base is up in arms. All the kids are gone. Oh, where's your kids? No, my kids are at home. Where's the other kids? No, I saw them playing by the rugby field. I don't know. And then suddenly he realizes, oh shit, all the kids are still in the DB. Yeah, it's an interesting story that. And one day my dad was acting RSM, and that RSM had this huge 4x4 drove around with. So the RSM's 4x4 pulls into our driveway, and we just walk hard square. We're not going to be here. And then later, oh no, it's my dad. He drove the RSM's car. Yeah, cool photos. Another cool story there. We were just in. We just finished in Sunday school. We just finished David and Goliath. So, this is impressive. We're going to build slingshots. So we found an old piece of carpet, and we got some rope. Slingshots. That's fun. We were starting to get good where you could hit the rugby ball from about 20 meters. So probably about 2 weeks into this craze. And now we're at the rugby field trying to throw this, and my one friend's sister is behind us. And as I'm letting go, something just doesn't feel right. And I turn around and I hit her right between the eyes. And it's just blood. And he starts crying, and I start crying because David and Goliath, right between the eyes, you're dead with a slingshot. We know that. If it gets a giant, this little girl stands no chance. Luckily, there was a troop on the pavilion. They just came back from the border, and he still had a bomb bandage in his brown pocket. So he took that off and bandaged her up. And I don't know if he told us that if we picked up rocks there, it's fine. It needs to be from a riverbed or something, but he calmed us down. And now, as we're walking back, and that will stay with me forever, her brother was like, please, just don't tell mom and dad. But she's got this big bomb bandage on it. There's no way you're going to miss that. You can see that thing from space. It was a real good one as well. Loads of other little funny things that happened there, and that can't remember everything. And then I think it was about 1987. My dad was transferred to Potch, and then we moved into the military area in Potchefstroom again. And luckily, I had mates who were in grade 1 with me, because we left when I was in grade 2. But some of the grade 1 mates were still there. So we just picked up the friendships and carried on. It was different. You were not as, it felt more like a town than it did the military base. But we still had fun. We took our bicycles for a ride next to the Air Force base, the flying school, and the Cessnas and Bosbox. It's like living next to train tracks. You get used to it eventually, but in the beginning, it's just always constant. And it's real irritating. It's not a nice engine sound. Bosbox doesn't have a real nice sound. Sounds like a lawnmower. There's micro lights, something like that. That also very interesting. Didn't do so much damage or got injured that much in Potch. I'm getting a bit older as well, and when I was in standard 7, my dad got transferred again, and I just said, nope, I'm staying, I'm finishing matric, I'm done with this moving school much. So stayed with my grandmom and dad, and there were no rules to break. So it was fun. Yes, so that was basically the first portion of growing up. I always loved listening to my granddad's stories from World War II, what he did and where he was. So he was in the 1st South African Infantry Division, and they moved up to Abyssinia, Libya, East Africa, and Egypt. They were at both the battles of El Alamein. Some of that ordnance, some of those guns were with my granddad. And their commanding officer was General Dan Pienaar, a very famous general. Always wore shorts. I actually found photos on the internet of General Dan Pienaar walking with, I think, Winston Churchill, and he's got his shorts on. And they disbanded after disbanded the 1st Infantry Division after the 2nd Battle of El Alamein. They took the guys back and they retrained them on armored cars, and they got what was it? It was Sherman Fireflies, American tanks, and then they also had Crusader light tanks, and then Marmon had scouting vehicles. And they then went back to Egypt, and from there they renamed them as the 6th Armored Division. Unfortunately, during that time, there was a plane accident, and General Pienaar died, and then Brigadier Poole, also in these 3 books, he comes through very well during the Second World War. He became the commanding officer, and then they went on to the Italian front. They were at Monte Cassino holding positions, and the Anzio beachhead. They also held positions there. They weren't active in the fight, but they were in blocking positions. But the interesting thing about Monte Cassino that my granddad told me is the artillery bombardment was so intense that they played football in the light that the guns made. I mean, that's hundreds and thousands of rounds to actually achieve that. And then there's a skeleton in the closet of the Union Defence Force that not a lot of people know about. After World War II, when the guys had to demobilize, the South Africans built a transit camp in Helwan in Egypt. It's just a little bit, it's in Cairo, but it's in the bottom south. It's right across Memphis, the whole city of Memphis. There's still 2 pyramids right across from it. And if there's one place on earth you don't want to be stuck, it's Cairo. I swore in my life I'm never going back there. I've been there once, that was enough. It is, it's not nice. And us being Afrikaans church-going boys, you learned that the Egyptians are bad. They stuffed Moses around. And the Pharaoh was no good guy. So I think that added to these guys' sentiment. But back to the story, the transit camps were built for 5,000 guys. That messes and cooks and everything, camp commander. And they bragged at one stage, and then they ferried the guys back via air. They bragged that a guy would not stay longer than 3 to 5 days in the transit camp before got him out and back to South Africa. So at the end of the war, they didn't realize the war was going to end. So now suddenly they were sitting with masses and masses of troops that's been built up over years, and these guys just want to go home. Prisoners of war were released, and everybody and his dog knew about this transit camp. So everybody biked on ships and cars and walked to get to Egypt. And eventually they ended up with 9,000 men in a space that was built for 5,000. And the guys became, they had nothing to do. And a big mistake the guys made, they dealt them in alphabetically and according to their date that they joined for overseas service. They gave them classifications. So the whole command structure was lost. They were dealt in with NCOs and other men they didn't know. And too many people, bored young guys, not a good combination. And the Egyptians didn't help. They were in control of the trade. So these soldiers felt they were exploited when buying things because of the high demand. These guys just liked the prices like they wanted to. And they also had 2 cinemas in town. And if you buy a ticket, you can go in, but they didn't clear the seats out after the show. They showed the same movie, so it's kind of pointless for us. But I think in 1945, being in Egypt, probably a bit cooler inside, outside. So the guys would keep on sitting there. So next guy has got a ticket, but it's full, so he can't go in. So these guys sharked him out of some money for the ticket. And the food was also a problem. The mess hall was double capacity. The guys would stand in queues, and when you get to the front, you can just as well go to the back again for the next meal. And some of these guys did just that. They sat down in the mess and they didn't leave. They just sat there for the next meal. So the tempers flared up. And what happened, they were showing a movie. And there's 2 versions to it. There's the official story, which is there were speeches and the crowd became this. But the unofficial story, which I heard from my granddad, said, but he wasn't part of this. He stayed on after the war in Italy, in Florence, 3 years. But some of his mates told him afterwards, because that we down there. The film broke and nothing happened, and these guys couldn't fix it. So one of the guys threw a rock at the screen and others joined in. And then somebody shouted, go sticky black on everyone, let's burn the place down. And they did exactly that. And the guys at the camp heard the commotion, and now you've got a mob of angry guys. And I mean, you just need 100 people out of that 9,000 to actually start. And when the Egyptian fire crew arrived, they got the fires under control. And just as the fires were near to under control, they cut the guys' hoses. So they couldn't put the fire out. They then called for help from the New Zealanders. The New Zealanders came there with their fire crew, same thing happened, and the New Zealanders thought it was a big joke. And the official reports say that the New Zealanders thought it was a joke. They weren't serious about stopping, and they felt that these guys were actually picking the looters' side. But long story short, the courts estimated the damage at £22 million. That is a hefty sum in 1946. Obviously, these business owners inflated the price a little bit, but still serious damage. So if you guys want to read up on it, it's the Alwan riots in Cairo. And that's it's just something that you don't find in these three books. Not something to be proud of. What added to that is how the structure and stuff changed after that, the lessons learned. So in demobilization from there on, units were kept together. They weren't just, we're going to do it the clerical way. We're back in Porch, and my dad, when he was transferred to Pretoria, he became project officer on the G6. Did a lot of work there. It was very interesting, and I just I was still doing that when I finished school, so I had a lot of free time while studying. So I joined him on a lot of road trips to wherever they had to take the guns for tests and stuff. They had one to see how the gun would rust. The only place that the South African government or the military owned that has direct sea spray, where you could pop the G6 and get direct sea spray on it, was at the Bluff at one reconnaissance regiment. So I actually got to spend some time there and actually sleep in the base, and I see it. And I met Sergeant Major Johnny de Gouveia there, great guy. A couple of red art drums there. It was really nice that the one reconnaissance regiment was disbanded at that stage, and they were known as 452 Parachute Battalion. But they were a lot of operators still in the base. They stayed in the bottom block. Interesting thing that happened there, the colonel that was with us, we in Durban, we're going out for the night to have some food, and he locked the keys in the boot of the car. Stuck there. So luckily in Talcomont's not far, so just down the road. So we slept down there, chatted to the guys, and got you sorted. Here comes the MP with a van, old police farm, proper spare wheel in the back. And my dad, the colonel had some stuff to do, so my dad said, "No, you finish your paperwork and stuff. We'll go back and preach it." So, but that helps next to the MP in front, and Cobus here in the back. Now, this guy is a Durban driver. They don't fuss around. So we're in traffic. He's weaving, and I'm at the back, spare wheel and all the way back to the Bluff, and getting out of the back of this. They let me out the back of the van. The guards weren't even faced, so I think that happened to a couple of those other guys there as well, that they were delivered there in a van. So yeah, also we could get a good look of the old whaling station, and how shot up that place was. Very, very nice, and I think a lot of people will ever see that. So they're privileged there. Also had a visit to 4 vehicle reserve park outside Pretoria. I haven't seen so many military vehicles in my life. It is just out of this world. Didn't know there were so many tanks and rifles available.
Cobus, I must tell you, this is fantastic for me because sometimes I sit here and I listen to the war stories. Now, I've got nothing against that. I respect that greatly, but sometimes there's a need for something on a lighter food. And you're supplying that to us, and I'm really grateful, and I thank you for that. And I can relate. I can relate to really a lot what you have to say. But I made notes, as always. And if you don't mind, I'll ask you a few questions here.
No, go for it.
Have you ever heard your parents complain about the military or about the way things were going?
No. One thing, my dad is a militarist through and through. So he's really was into that. Oh, this is the military. This is how it works. And people not in the military won't really get it. The relationship between NCOs and officers, for example, people don't get that mutual respect. Yes, the lieutenant can tell the sergeant major to go to hell, but the sergeant major's got the colonel on speed dial. You don't do that. There's just this whole way how things work, and the NCO is going to keep you alive, lieutenant. So treat him with respect. Where when you try to tell that to a civilian, it's like, no, it doesn't make sense. But he's your boss, and he's 19, and you're 28. So back to no, never ever complained about the military. Our stuff was lots of fights with the paymaster because pay was late or clerical errors for danger pay not being. They got danger pay cash, but housing subsidies and stuff like that didn't work pay. So huge fights about that. But I mean, that's admin. Never about the job or what they were doing. Also, totally apolitical. Didn't discuss politics. You don't talk church politics, rugby teams. That's something for you and you only. And we were also taught that you just don't speak about certain things, people you don't know. And you're respectful of their opinions, but what you feel and what you think is your business. It has absolutely nothing to do with them. And one thing my dad always said, the army was there to serve the government of the day. And if that government changes, the army will serve the new government of the day. It is not a political machine. And with checks and balances, the army is there to keep the government honest. And you've seen that in coups and coup d'etats and things like that, where the government's absolutely mistreating the populace, and then the army can step in, perform a coup, and get a government going again. But that's extreme cases. And then obviously you get the general wants power and does it for the wrong reasons. There's two sides to every story, three sometimes. But there was always that you do your job, that's your job. But in the bigger picture, it's a machine. I think another thing as well, so it's a bit off topic now, but the army is a machine and everybody had something to do. Everybody had added value. Even the guy that drove the mail truck up and down, he had an important job to do. And when it comes to the war stories, and these guys, some of them may not feel that they can contribute or be part of it. And that's actually sad. While the guys were there, if you put always made fun of the infantry acts, the artillery and infantry acts always give each other gas. But when it comes to fighting, they love each other because they look after each other. And yes, the guy cooking the food, guy peeling the potatoes, he had an important job to do. The ammo didn't just drop from the sky. Well, Yeah, sometimes it did. But there were still guys in that airplane helping it come down. Yeah, and the whole logistics of the army, how fascinating that was. There was a logistics guy at Forsyth, great stuff, and he can tell you still today how much liter of diesel do you need to run this vehicle, that vehicle, that vehicle, and how many rounds of ammo do you need for, and food do you need for so many troops for this battle plan. And they got it wrong, but seldom.
Are your parents still with us, and your granddad?
My dad unfortunately passed away in April last year. It was very difficult because of distance. I'm in New Zealand and South Africa, but he was, the last 2 years, he was really sick and he basically dropped all of his body weight. So yeah, it was not nice, but still his memories live on, and yeah, we miss him a lot. Yeah. My mom's still in Pretoria. She's still doing her stuff. My grandmother lives with her. She's still alive as well, going strong. She's aiming for 100. And my granddad, he passed away about 6 years ago, but also at the age of 92. So got good service history.
Yeah, they were tough, that generation, the one of the Second World War. We'll get to that. Of course, we're sorry to hear about your loss. I have to say it here, and we know how it feels. I've been through death myself many times, sadly. It's like you're wet to me. You know there's something missing, you know there's something wrong. Doesn't matter how much the time goes, but we go through it, and that's why we have faith. Now I need to ask you, is your wife, you're a happily married man, is your wife also from a military family?
No. She, her parents are both school teachers. So it's totally different environment. Yes. She in the beginning it was weird. We went to a lot of functions with my parents, military functions and stuff. So in the beginning it was, but eventually, oh no, okay, this is how it works, and there we go.
Well, I was wondering about that, because when you was describing your youth, and it's one of the few times I'm speaking to somebody younger than me. Well, it's good today. I mean, normally these people is like, yes, well, and but when you people were out there on the shooting range and you were doing the trekking and the camping and the rat packs, I used to love rat packs as well, and especially the milkshakes. You had like a powder, and then you would shake it.
Yeah.
And
I don't know. That strawberry milkshake was awesome.
Oh yeah, vanilla. And those chocolate bars that was kind of nice too, if your teeth could survive them, of course. I liked all of them, from the dark biscuits. The only thing I hated was chili con carne. And that's what I always ended up with, chili con carne. I don't even know how to say chili con carne or whatever, but that was horrible, especially when you had to go to the toilet afterwards. But I liked the rations. But were you only boys there, or were the girls there also? Were you like a mix?
No, girls as well. No, just mixed. So and huge age gaps between us. You always get your younger brother walking behind you, and small kids. We're following the high school kids, and our little brothers are following us. And, yeah, so the older kids, sometimes they put us up to no good. Like in the one time, we got a ramp for a vehicle. If you want to work on your car, there's one guy built. And you know what? If you take a piece of wood and you put it on that, you can ramp a BMX a long way. And then one of the older kids said, but do you know there's a guy in America that ramps over buses and people and stuff? Oh, well, let's line the kids up in the street. So kids lying in the street. Luckily, bike landed on nobody, but stupid things.
Well, I can just imagine that scene. But I have a question. You know, the Afrikaner is a respectful person. That's actually why we're speaking English here. It's because there's a lot of people who will not understand when we speak the taal, which we both are fluent speakers anyway. But what would you call the RSM? Would you call him RSM of Samayor or just Samayor?
Eddie of Sampi of Dirk. Ek wil very actually Dirk Venter, he was also awesome character, unique sense of humor, and I've got a couple of stories, but I cannot tell them on air. One story I can tell about Dirk. He lost his finger in a mortar. They were putting a fuse on a mortar. It was an accident, and he lost his finger. And my dad comes home and he's laughing. Dirk is very, very upset. Why? No, they want to see him at the headquarters. He apparently swore at a colonel or a commandant or something. He says he didn't do it, and he's going to fight this Ouke Bliksem. And what happened was these Dirk and this commandant stopped at a four-way stop, and Dirk shouting he can go. But Dirk lost his finger, so it looked like a middle finger. Colorful language to it.
Yes, I'm quite sure that the army language is fairly unique. Lots of F words and things in between, but you know, that was life. I don't think we should point fingers, and I'm like laughing now. We should do that. It's a funny thing because tomorrow, that's about a week ago from when you people are seeing this, Kim is speaking about his 3-2 battalion days. Now, very good episode. I really expect a lot of it. And he was talking how he would resupply the people in the field, all the battalions or the companies as they move around. And he says the one thing they always wanted was mail. He says you could arrive there basically without food or water or whatever. They wouldn't mind that much, but if they didn't get their mail, they would be upset. So it seems to me when you were talking about, you know, the guy doing the mail or the guy doing the mechanics, everybody played a role. The army is one hell of a big organization. We keep on forgetting that.
Yeah. Yeah, that everything in the army is self-contained. There was not really need for a lot of contractors. I mean, maybe electrician or a plumber here and there, but most of the stuff they could do themselves. I mean, these guys had engineers, built bridges, buildings and stuff. They could operate that earth-moving equipment.
What I've seen of them is that they were men who could work with their hands. They would service their own vehicles, for instance. They would cut their own grass. They would build whatever they need to get built. Practical people, salt of the earth.
Yeah, definitely. Except for the lawn mowing. My dad had slaves. I mowed the lawn. After I electrocuted myself with the lawnmower, okay, we're not having an electric lawnmower, so he got me a push mower that's man-powered, like no engine in it. And that guy didn't fly so well. So did that for a while and then got a petrol. But lawn you will mow.
Well, we had quite extended gardens in South Africa when I grew up anyway, so you could spend the entire Saturday morning or Saturday morning, normally you would cut the grass and then on the afternoon there would be a rugby game or something, and you better not lose, especially not against an English school. God will not help you if you lose against an English school. On Monday you might be sorted out of a cane there for daring to lose, especially not the fight. If you win the fight convincingly, then you might be saved for a hiding on Monday. And looking back, some people say to me that's barbaric, but I don't think so. I think we were actually just healthy, normal children.
Yeah.
But
but it was always this Afrikaans English thing. It's always been there, but it's like two brothers fighting. You get along when you have to. I had English friends my whole life. My uncle was in the Rhodesian army, and both my cousins were English, so they were English speaking. So from an early age, spoke the language. Although I'm 100% Afrikaans, you wouldn't say that on my surname, but yeah, we totally off.
Well, your grandfather would have taken the red oath, or he would not have been able to go to North Africa and the rest. But before we get to that, I have a last question for you about your childhood, especially in the 80s. There were a lot of terrorist attacks in South Africa itself. And anything which had to do with the military or the security forces was seen as a legitimate target. Now, a lot of people, of course, will say to me that, yes, they attacked everything and whatever. I don't want to get into that. Go and read the TRC reports and you will find out who did what and who didn't do, and so forth. But have you ever felt as a military child that you might be killed by terrorists, as we call them?
We were not killed, but if you expect the unexpected, then you're sort of ready for it. So we were prepared. The guards at the gate, even though they knew whoever, they still looked under the car with these stupid little mirrors that they look under a car and ask questions and search. So yes, it was very real threat, but I think the thing is soft targets easier to get to. Where the moment you start touching military things, then it's a bit of a little hassle you may not want to face. Like if somebody attacked our bus, that quiet one, he would have shouted them to death. And then he would have shot them because he came with his hunting rifle. So I'm sure there would have been 3 or 4 oaks that got the ones that lived. I would feel sorry for them because, geez, he was upset old man.
I saw an interesting thing in the police. We would drive in the townships, as if they were called, on counter-terrorism and riot duties. And they would not shoot at the camouflage Caspers, only shot at the yellow ones. And we couldn't figure it out. For a long time, we thought that perhaps they just couldn't see the camo ones. But I mean, camo in the street, it doesn't make sense. It's a huge moving tree. I mean, you could see it, but they never shot at them. Anyway, that was the idea we had. And then we got to the feeling that, yes, perhaps they don't want confrontation with the military, at least because they might die.
Actually, I saw that in Kwandebele with the riots. Forsyth had a camp set up there, and the guys were throwing stones at the police and going. And then the moment that police commander hands over to the army, the stone throwing just stops when the police pull back and the buffels move in. Those guys just, no, we're not having any of this. And they would duck off.
I think you're quite right, because my father was, my late father was a regional magistrate, and he dealt with a lot of the terrorism cases. Very good lawyer in life. And he said to me, and I was very insulted being in the police, he said to me that it came out in his courts that the people are actually scared of army. And I felt to myself, well, we were ones who's been fighting this, why are they not scared of us? I was very insulted, actually. You know, when you're young, you're stupid.
Yeah.
But then he said, but just look at what they're armed with. Yeah. The difference is the police have shotguns and things with birdshot. They can't really kill anybody. Not to say they didn't, but it was made very difficult for the police to kill. Well, the army had no such things. The army was just that the R4 rifles or R1s, and they did kill. So when the army started shooting, it was the end. I mean, they shot to kill. Yeah. Of course, there's no such thing as shoot to wound anyway, unless you're a sniper. It's one of these pet hates of mine, you know, where the journalists, let me roll my eyes, mainstream rubbish. And they always have this dramatic thing, oh, there's an order to shoot to kill. Let me tell you, madam, sir, when you start shooting, you always shoot to kill. You don't leave witnesses. And that's as far as I'll put it. But let's go further to the Second World War, because Winston Churchill, I call him an arch liar actually in my books. He's a fellow who does not impress me. And I know a lot of people will be very upset about that. I don't care. I've got the evidence. Go and read the books and you'll find out why I'm saying that. But one of the things which he pissed me off most was he said, and this is written, you can go and look for it. He said that the South African army, when they moved into Abyssinia and East Africa and then on into North Africa, are surely good enough to take on the Italians. And what he meant by that is they were not good enough to fight the Germans. Now, this is from a fellow whose army ran away at Dunkirk as fast as they could, and only came back to Europe on an American command with, I think, 48 American soldiers for every one of them. So I really found his statements ridiculous, but he said a lot of things which are ridiculous. Now,
Yes.
now it's funny to me also that South Africa is actually the one who got Abyssinia and those countries released from Italian colonial power. And yet these were the countries which turned on South Africa immediately afterwards, which I always found very ironical. Did your grandfather ever say something about that, or did he never discuss that injustice, as I feel?
No, it was more about how it looks, how they moved, what they did. One thing, at one stage they were cut off, and the only thing they had to eat, they found bone meal in a shed, so they only had a bag of bone meal to eat. Stories like that, never about anything that could turn. And we were small as well, so he wasn't going to tell us a political story about, yes, the English did this and that. And interesting thing, my dad's father, he passed away when my dad was 13, so a long time ago, but he was like in fierce Oswald brandweer, totally against the war and everything, just because of the English being involved. Not about soldiering or anything, but the English and what they stood for and the whole Boer War. And I mean, the Boer War was still fresh in some people's minds in the First World War. So the Second World War, there was still some animosity.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, feelings were running very high. Those soldiers who dared to take the red oath had to wear like a little red lint or something on their shoulder. Sometimes when they went into church, the rest of the people would get up and walk out. They were that angry. So I have a lot of respect for those soldiers. And they were not treated well, let me tell you, when they came back. Because there was a bit of a cleaning process going on after the nationalists took over in 48. They simply got rid of their people who they fought in the army was too English. And they forgot the skills which these people had. And they forgot that these people, you know, were proud South Africans, most of them. They were just serving. Now, in Italy, with the 6th Armored Division, they fought under Mark Clark, the American general, great friend of General Eisenhower. And he wrote something about them after the war, which I will put in here. I'll try and quote it for us. And he rated them very highly. He said they were a battle-hardened outfit. They were always willing to fight. They never hang back. And if they couldn't move with their tanks forward, they would use them as artillery. So they came out of that war with very high reputation indeed. And in North Africa, well, there were different divisions. I mean, you cannot take away the Indian army. People forget about them. The New Zealanders were known as the crack infantry. They were always leading. And the Australians also, you know, tough people. And then came the British, as I always say. So this mutiny, which took place, caused something else, which I want to highlight here. All the combat soldiers were sent home as quickly as possible. And yes, there was this riot going on in that place you're talking about for understandable reasons. They didn't treat the people well. And they've been fighting for many years and they just wanted to get home. They're sick and tired of the war. Some stayed behind. But especially in Europe, where the South Africans were not, except in Italy, a dreadful thing started happening. And I think our sponsor writes about it in Codename 1 Alpha, which is a book about the links between terrorism and human trafficking and white slavery. There's a lot of terrorism links between them, which the guy highlights for us. So he goes into the history, and it turns out that the Allies were committing a lot of war crimes. But they were not the combat soldiers. They were the new guys who got trained and then they were sent from the States or the UK or wherever. They got into Europe, which was totally destroyed. The bombing campaigns and the war has destroyed Europe. And there were a lot of famine. There were a lot of hunger. So you could buy a woman for a teaspoon of sugar. Now, my argument is as follows. And I got a lot of criticism for it, but I'll stand by my argument. If you're a real man, you will give a sugar without expecting something more.
Yeah.
But sadly, this did not happen. And then when you do it like that, as far as I'm concerned, you're committing a rape. End of story.
Yeah.
Now, this brings me back to you. Have you ever heard of crimes being committed inside the military base?
Actually, yes, I've heard it's all bullshit. There's that crazy South African writer, John Meyer. I've got ugly words to say. Where he tells about he saw this over the radio, chopper pilot shot the oaks, and where this prisoner of war was kept in a pit. And it's like, weird. I've never even heard of that. So, yes, I've heard stories, but it's all loads of crap. There were troops that were charged for criminal events, theft, drunk on duty. That stuff happened. Well, it's always one rotten apple, but they were dealt with. And that's another part of the military that's overlooked. It's a well judicial system as well, apart from the civilian one. I mean, the military has its own court, police, a board of inquiry is held, everything is dealt with in a structured manner. Yes, I think if it wasn't for vehicle theft, the 3-2 battalion would never get off the ground, because they had to scrounge and steal all their weapons and ammo in the beginning, from what I've read. So yeah.
Yeah, it's true. There were a lot of books came out in the 1990s, especially, where people were writing sorts of things which I was looking at, and I thought to myself, wow, I don't remember that. And I always ask the people, yeah, are you aware of any war crimes? Everybody says to me, no. So it's very hard to prove. I'm sure that certain things that happen, I mean, it would have, you cannot deny everything, but as a general idea,
Yeah.
as a policy, it was a highly disciplined military. There were not such crap.
That's what a lot of people are trying to get behind. That was sort of this, these guys these days institutionalized. But there was nothing like that. The SA Army was one of the most integrated pieces of society in the whole South Africa that there was. And there was absolutely that everybody was treated the same. They were shouted at the same level and did the same amount of push-ups.
Well, yeah, our special forces, for instance, was a lot of black soldiers there. We're trying to get them on the show as well. Very hard, because these men are really not talking, and you can't even get pictures of it. The white guys would still have a picture somewhere. These guys just don't, for obvious reasons. But it's fascinating to me because the South African Army is, and a lot of people will now again start throwing stones, but actually have a good disciplinary record. When the sponsor of ours, when he wrote codename Alphabet 32, he looked at the disciplinary record of a new National Defence Force in these peacekeeping duties of it. And would you believe it turned out that they had a much better record than the French Army. The book is a year or two old, and I'm speaking out of memory now, but something like 3 people ever were accused of and tried, like in going to court, for child abuse or sexual abuse. And that is like 0.0000 something of the people who were there.
Yeah.
And if anybody here knows about the military police and the detention barracks, you will not joke about it. I mean, I know the children who were locked up there, that of course was a joke. But if you were there for real, you're going to regret whatever you've done. You're going to regret it. These people will work with you. You will run until you cannot run anymore, and then you'll run even more.
Yeah, they when they took these guys out to exercise, they had a red doily on, and they always had the most sadistic corporal on the parade ground, and he would run those guys that they couldn't run anymore. Because if you see an oak with a red doily, you know he's in deep trouble. And I think everybody that walks past him will order him to do push-ups, and then it's back to the DB. And but there were serial AWOLers as well. So one story about this surfer dude, and the military and him just didn't gel well, and he was always on AWOL. Oh, geez, they didn't want to give him pass because he would just disappear, and then the MPs bring him back, and then pass, or he went over the wire and gone again.
Well, the sad thing about that is, if I'm correct, is that the time he spent into the detention barracks, it doesn't count for his 2 years. So in other words, now he can spend there 3 years because 1 year of that he was running around in the DB. Yeah. Of course, when you have, I have sympathy. There's 2 groups of people on this channel. One is the PFs, the permanent force people, your dad. And then there's the national servicemen, and the 2 doesn't really like each other that much. And some of them really dislike each other.
It's miscommunication, I think. And as years passed, some of those relationships are being mended. And if there's any gunners out there, please join the Gunners Association, go to the website, they've got events. A lot of guys actually caught up again. What's interesting about my dad's career, he left the army in, I think, 1995. He was not happy with the way that the MK Opla integration worked and the breakdown in discipline that happened. It was poor planning, and it could have been done better in his opinion. And I think a little bit of a midlife crisis as well in there, and he then took a severance package from the army, and he tried other stuff, and he was civilian for about 10 years, and then he joined the Army Reserves, where these guys were your citizen force units, so they were civilians. And actually the support and friends that he made there, those awesome people, and they didn't know each other so well because they really didn't mingle. And with him being there, and also the whole structure changed, where the artillery and infantry were grouped into a formation. So you had your artillery formation, your infantry formation. So your PFs and your citizen force guys, the Army Reserves now, they're not the citizen force anymore. They got to meet each other on a more social level, and actually quite good. It was a yearly artillery golf day. Great fun. So
Well, you must have enjoyed Ferdi.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, Colonel Clive Woolsworth wrote a book, First In, First Out, or First In, Last Out, about the South African artillery during 1975 to the end of the war. But it's not your normal storybook. He takes a lot of first-person accounts, detailed sketches, photos. So, like at Breach 14, where Ferdi described how they were, he actually has sketches of where the batteries were located, who the battery commanders were. He tells the story of the 5.5 that fell off the pond into the river and how they got it out. Actually has a photo of the gun crew and the gun in there as well. And also around how artillery works, how does locating work, radar, anti-bombardments, and doctrine. And then a lot of these first-person accounts of this is what this guy wrote, and real interesting book. If you can get your hands on it, real good read.
Yeah, I will definitely want to read that. It's fascinating. But I think I said it yesterday in another recording to somebody, but we're reaching the stage now at the channel where people start confirming each other.
Yes.
When this guy talks about that guy and that guy, they don't even, it's not at the same time, but it's just amazing to me. It seems like we're cross-checking each other all the time.
I was in preparation for this. I was reading up again on a couple of things that were hazy just to get my dates right. And actually, I got very story how they were on the train and how the two troops moved out. It's not as colorful as his description. And there's more stories. One group had a bit more storytelling or better record keeping. But what's interesting, the artillery guys behind them, where they heard the rounds coming over, that specific battery was at the dairy farm. And one of the bombardiers or the lieutenants grew up on a dairy farm near Zeerust, and it was quick, and he had the dairy going there. He was milking cows and swapping milk for treats. But they painted the cow, UNITA, on the flanks of the cow in green paints, like they painted the armored cars as well. So when he said they painted everything with UNITA, they did, even the cow.
Well, you know, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. That's why I really love hearing these stories. Because these things you will never hear in the history books. Sadly so, you know, the history books are more specialized, I suppose. It's the great general. There's a place for that. But I think it would be a pity if the stories gets lost because they're not recorded somewhere. That's why I'm grateful to you. But tell me, Cobus, what happened to you then afterwards, once you got out of school? Because now the army you were not called up anymore. Those days were over.
It was actually sad for me. I really wanted to go. That was my career aspiration, was being a soldier. Join up and study through the army, but never had plans going into civilian life. We're always serving. So I went to Potchefstroom University. I studied computer science, and then became a computer programmer. I still am today. My first job was quite interesting. Worked in a military field still. We worked with military intelligence, and now it's from a civilian perspective, working on military systems. So I love that as well. And the stuff that they did. I knew all the beret badges and that stuff, but I never knew military intelligence guys because they were never at the base. You knew the guys from Donitron Combat School. They've got Jackal, so it's an intelligence officer. it's the difference in Afrikaans. It's militaire inligting, which is the Jackal Beret badge, and then militaire intelligentie, the Jackal, and then militaire inligting, which is a L. And I only got to meet these guys actually after, and I was working with them. And they had the School of Military Intelligence there in Sterrewell. Waterkloof, beautiful view, little golf course thingy going there as well. And a couple of big nights with them in the Navy mess in Pretoria. Good times. Also, they did electronic collection of information, newspapers, everything they could get there, and so on. And we just helped them categorize and make it easier for translators and interpreters these things. But you went through the whole, you have to go have a top secret clearance, so Grave Corps Anticoms, and wants to know the last 40 years of history, and you're only in your 20s. So, quite interesting, long, grueling interview with them. And I told my dad, okay, now I've got my top secret clearance, because he always said, no, I can't tell you that, you don't have a top secret clearance. But he never told me anything.
Yeah, my mother was the same. She, I would always ask her about her life in the shadows, and she would say to me that you don't have a clearance to hear, and she never talked. Absolutely. Till the day she died, she didn't talk. They take it seriously, these people, actually. They do take an oath and that type of thing seriously. But then you moved to New Zealand, and you're quite happy there now. Yes.
It's a lot of things that led to it, and we had friends that moved here, and I came for a visit, and actually, it's a nice place, and what I like it, the children still grow up in the same manner that they can still play in the street and get home when the street lights come on, and that's really nice. We've got kids in the driveway during the afternoon. You just have to drive slowly. Problems. So, and then it's a beautiful place. I sent you a couple of pictures of the town we live in. We've got a port, and basically mostly avocados and kiwi fruit farming, and then the port. It's the biggest container port in New Zealand. Quite a large operation there as well.
On internet, we came to an end of this one, and I have to say, Cobus, thank you for this. It was good for me to hear the funny side of life again. And I say to everybody listening here, if you have a story, if you want to come and talk to me, please come. Don't hesitate. Come and talk to us. And until we meet again, God bless.